So here's something that should make your stomach drop. There are 12 suburbs in this country where the average person, a nurse, a teacher, someone with a real job, has been completely mathematically erased from ever owning. Not priced out, erased. And the wild part? These aren't some ultra-rare, one-of-a-kind spots. These are places your parents probably drove past on a Sunday. We're going through all 12 today, and I promise by the end, you're going to feel something between rage and vertigo. Stick around for number 7. It's genuinely unhinged. Number 1, Bellevue Hill. Picture this. You're a doctor, not a med student, not a resident. A fully qualified, actually saving lives doctor with a real salary and a decade of training behind you. You cannot afford to rent in Bellevue Hill. Let that sink in. On paper, Bellevue Hill looks like any other leafy Sydney street. Big trees, nice letterboxes, the kind of neighborhood where someone is always pressure washing their driveway. It sits in Sydney's eastern suburbs, and from the outside, it just looks like a nice place to live. But the median house price here is somewhere between $7 and $9 million. And I'm not talking about some renovated architectural masterpiece. I'm talking about a house that still has the original 1970s kitchen with the yellow tiles and the dodgy range hood. Back in the early 90s, Bellevue Hill was expensive but not insane. A couple with 2 solid incomes and a plan could actually get there. That window is completely gone. Sydney is now ranked the 2nd most expensive housing market in the entire world, and Bellevue Hill is sitting right at the pointy end of that. But here's what nobody tells you. A massive chunk of properties here are owned through corporate structures so layered and complicated that you basically cannot figure out who actually lives there. Investment holdings, overseas trusts, shell companies, the whole thing. So you've got this gorgeous suburb with harbor views and beautiful parks, and on a Tuesday afternoon the streets are almost empty. Not quiet, empty, like everyone went to lunch and just never came back. The people who own here aren't doctors or lawyers. They're people whose money earns money while they sleep, or they arrived with capital that was never touched by Australian tax law to begin with. Bellevue Hill didn't stumble into this. It was the first suburb in the eastern suburbs to figure out what happens when housing stops being a home and starts being a product on a shelf. And once that idea takes hold in one suburb, the ones sitting next to it start running the exact same numbers. Number 2, Point Piper. Point Piper is the answer to a question nobody asked. What if a suburb got so expensive it stopped being a real place and just became a vibe? Not a neighborhood, a concept, a flex. That's Point Piper. This is consistently ranked as the most expensive suburb in the entire country. The median house price doesn't just have a comma in it, it has multiple commas. We're talking $20 million plus for the top end, and the so-called affordable end of the street is still sitting around $10 million. $10 million for the cheap one. But here's what really gets me. Point Piper is tiny. Like, genuinely embarrassingly tiny. A small finger of land poking into Sydney Harbor with maybe a few hundred houses on it. That's it. And yet this little strip has absorbed more global wealth than most regional Australian towns will ever see in their entire existence. Let that sink in. The buyers here aren't buying a home. They're buying a status marker, a proof of concept. It's basically like buying a limited edition sneaker drop, except the sneaker has a private jetty and a wine cellar that costs more than your car. And here's the thing. Point Piper used to have actual families in it. Working professionals, some old money sure, but real people living real lives. Now, when you look at who actually owns these properties, you start seeing holding companies, trusts, overseas addresses. There was a Reddit thread where someone described buying in Point Piper as paying $20 million to live next to an empty house owned by a shell company in Singapore. And honestly, that's not even an exaggeration. So what you're left with is the most expensive ghost town in the Southern Hemisphere. A suburb that became a financial instrument so completely that the neighborhood part just quietly disappeared. And the scary part is that this isn't staying contained to Point Piper. That same process is creeping into suburbs that used to be completely normal. Number 3, Vaucluse. Vaucluse has this reputation as the crown jewel of Sydney real estate. And yeah, the views are genuinely insane. Sweeping harbor on one side, open ocean on the other. The kind of thing you see on a postcard and think is edited. But here's what the real estate brochure absolutely does not say. The people buying these homes aren't really buying them to live in them. The median house price in Vaucluse is sitting north of $7 million right now, which already sounds completely unhinged. But the wilder story isn't the number. It's who's on the other side of the contract. Because investor activity here has completely warped what buying a house even means. These aren't people who are going to move in, learn the neighbor's dog's name, and argue about where the boundary fence goes. These are capital allocation decisions. Someone in a boardroom, or honestly just on their phone, decides Sydney Harbor is a good place to park money. And that's it. That's the whole transaction. And here's what nobody tells you about Australia's tax system. It's literally paying investors to do this. Negative gearing lets property investors deduct their losses against their other income, which cuts their tax bill. The capital gains tax discount then halves what they owe when they sell. So there is a direct financial reward for buying a Vaucluse house and leaving the lights off while the value climbs. So you, a real person with a real job and a real need for somewhere to live, are walking into an auction against someone who doesn't even plan to sleep there, and who the government is essentially subsidizing to outbid you. Back in 1987, Australia's median housing cost was 2.8 times the average income. By 2025 in Sydney, that number hit 13.8 times. That's not a market anymore. That's a different game with different rules that nobody told you about. Walk around Vaucluse on a weeknight and it's quieter than it has any right to be. Gorgeous streets, manicured gardens, barely a light on. Number 4, Bronte. Bronte never had the old money thing going on. No inherited wealth energy, no pretension. Just a great beach, a beautiful rock pool, good coffee, and the kind of relaxed vibe that made you feel like you'd found a loophole. For most of the 90s and early 2000s, a young couple with decent jobs could actually get in here. That era is completely, officially over. The median house price in Bronte right now is somewhere between $5 and $6 million. And if you think a house sounds too ambitious, fine. A unit will cost you $1.5 to $2 million. Not a house, a unit. Let that sink in. But here's the twist that really gets under my skin. Bronte didn't get taken over by billionaires. It got taken over by the people who got pushed out of the suburbs above it. The upper middle class got priced out of the ultra-expensive eastern suburbs and landed in Bronte instead. And that wave of displacement money tripled the median price in roughly 15 years. So the ultra-rich buy the top suburbs, which pushes the merely very rich into Bronte, which pushes everyone else further and further out. It's a cascade. What used to be a nurse's commutable suburb is now a second home market for people who already own something somewhere else. And the people who actually grew up in Bronte, whose parents bought there in the 80s and built a life, they cannot afford to stay. So they sell the family home, take the cash, and move to the Central Coast or the Illawarra. That's the deal. You trade your community for your retirement fund. And a lot of families are taking it because what other option do they have? Sydney's median house price is now 13.8 times the median household income. Bronte is sitting right inside that number, getting swept along by the same wave whether it asked to be or not. The beach is still free. The house next to it is another story entirely. Number 5, Mosman. Mosman used to be the goal, not the fantasy. The actual, realistic, work hard enough and you'll get there goal for North Shore families. Good schools, harbor access, leafy streets, the kind of suburb where you'd raise kids and stay forever. Now it's the punchline in a joke about how completely broken Sydney's housing market has become. The median house price in Mosman is sitting around $5 to $6 million. For a suburb that's supposed to be about family life and community and all that wholesome stuff, that number is genuinely deranged. But here's what nobody tells you about why it got there. The zoning laws in Mosman are incredibly restrictive. You basically cannot build anything new, no apartments. Very limited medium density, just big old houses on big old blocks, protected by planning rules that were written specifically to keep the suburb exactly as it looks right now. And that sounds lovely, right? Preserving the character, keeping the streets beautiful. Sounds nice. But here's the catch. When you can't build anything new, you artificially cap the supply of homes. And when supply is capped and demand keeps growing, prices don't just rise, they explode. The Demographia report, which tracks housing affordability across the globe, specifically calls out Sydney's urban containment policies as a key driver of exactly this. Restrict supply, watch prices go vertical. It's not complicated, but fixing it is politically radioactive. And here's why. The people who already own in Mosman vote. They vote in every single local election, and they vote to keep the zoning exactly where it is. because their house going up in value depends on nothing new ever being built near it. So the system that got them in is the exact same system that permanently locks everyone else out. It's a self-sealing loop. The fortress is real. Number 6, Rose Bay. Rose Bay has a seaplane terminal. I'm not joking. You can literally fly in by seaplane. And somehow that's not even the most unhinged thing about trying to live here. So, Rose Bay sits tucked into Sydney Harbor between Vaucluse and Double Bay, and it has this old-world glamour thing going on. Grand homes, waterfront access, private jetties, the kind of street that makes you feel like you've accidentally wandered onto a film set. The median house price is somewhere between $5 and $7 million, depending on what's moving. Already absurd. But here's what nobody tells you about where that money is actually coming from. Rose Bay has become a landing pad for international buyers, particularly from Asia and the Middle East, who want a Sydney base that signals serious wealth. And because of the gaps in Australia's foreign investment rules, a lot of this buying happens through structures that are technically legal but practically invisible. You can't easily trace who owns what, and a huge chunk of the nicest properties here are owned by people who show up for maybe a few weeks a year. The rest of the time, the lights are off. Back in the 80s, Rose Bay was wealthy, but it was alive. Kids went to the local school. The corner shops knew your name. Now the corner shops are selling $25 acai bowls, and the school waiting list is 3 years long. 3 years. The permanent population has shifted so far toward the ultra-wealthy that even the basic services have repriced themselves out of reach for anyone normal. So what you've got is global money treating Sydney Harbor like a storage unit. Not a home. Not a community. A storage unit with a really good view and apparently its own air transport infrastructure. The seaplane isn't ironic. It's just Tuesday. This is number 7, by the way. Told you it was unhinged. Number 7, Manly. Manly was never supposed to be a rich person's suburb. That was literally the whole point. Backpackers, surfers, young families, tourists, everyone just mixed together around the beach and nobody made it weird. That era is gone. Like, properly gone. The median house price in Manly is now somewhere between $3.5 and $4.5 million. And before you ask, no, it didn't get there slowly. COVID did this. Specifically, the remote work boom that hit between 2020 and 2022 turned Manly into ground zero for every professional in Sydney who'd been dreaming about the beach lifestyle but couldn't justify the ferry commute. Suddenly, the commute didn't matter anymore. And every single one of those people decided to move at exactly the same time. Demand went absolutely vertical. Supply did nothing. Prices followed demand, obviously, and they haven't come back down in any meaningful way since. But here's what nobody tells you about who actually paid for all of this. It wasn't the ultra-wealthy swooping in from overseas. It was upper-middle-class professionals with remote work flexibility and access to low interest rates, outbidding the teachers and the tradies and the young families who'd been renting in Manly for years. The rent hikes alone were enough to push those people out. They didn't even make it to the auction stage. So the people who actually built Manly's community, who made it the kind of place everyone wanted to move to, got displaced by the very demand their community created. That's a special kind of brutal. And here's the real kick in the teeth. The remote work flexibility that made Manly desirable in the first place is being rolled back. Employers are calling people back to the office. So the people who bought during the boom are now doing that hour-long ferry commute every day anyway. And the people who got priced out are just permanently gone. The ferry still runs. The community it used to carry is a different question entirely. Number 8, Coogee. Coogee used to be the backup plan. When Bondi got too expensive, you went to Coogee. Wide bay, protected swimming, great community vibe, and prices that were at least in the same universe as a normal person's salary. That loophole is completely gone. The median house price in Coogee is now sitting between $3.5 and $4 million. Units, not houses units, are pushing $1.5 million. And the wild thing is that Coogee didn't do this on its own. It got pushed there by the suburb above it. Here's how the chain works. When Bondi became impossible, buyers flooded into Coogee. When Coogee got expensive, they moved to Maroubra. When Maroubra got picked up, they moved further south again. Every suburb just absorbs the overflow from the one above it, and the prices keep climbing down the line like dominoes falling in slow motion. The wave doesn't stop. It just keeps moving and repricing everything it touches. But here's what really makes this brutal. The people who used to live in Coogee, nurses at Prince of Wales Hospital literally down the road, teachers at the local schools, council workers, their wages haven't tripled in 15 years. The suburb has. So the maths just flat out doesn't work anymore. To comfortably service a mortgage on a median Coogee house, you need to be earning around $250,000 a year. The median Australian household income is about $100,000. You do the maths. Actually don't, it'll genuinely ruin your day. So what you're left with is a suburb that used to be the affordable escape hatch from the eastern suburbs madness, now sitting completely out of reach for the exact people who made it worth living in. The nurses, the teachers, the council workers. Gone. The backup plan ran out. Number 9. South Coogee. Most people outside Sydney have never heard of South Coogee. And for a long time, that was the whole point. Quiet streets, ocean views, a low-key residential vibe that basically said, not yet discovered. That anonymity was its superpower. Past tense. The median house price here has crossed $4 million. For a suburb that most Sydney residents couldn't point to on a map 10 years ago, that number is genuinely wild. But here's what nobody tells you about how it got there. Real estate agents found it? That's it. That's the whole story. Someone wrote it up, called it up and coming, maybe slapped hidden gem in the headline, and the investors followed. That's how this works. You label a quiet suburb as the next big thing. The money moves in, prices spike, and suddenly the hidden gem is just another suburb with a good Instagram background and zero affordable housing. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the agents know it. They're not discovering these places. They're pricing them. And the people who were actually renting in South Coogee when this happened? They didn't see it coming. Their landlords absolutely did. Rents went up. Leases didn't get renewed. The quiet little community that had been slowly building there just dispersed. No announcement, no warning, just gone. Here's the thing that makes this even more maddening. A lot of the buying that drove this happened sight unseen. Investors purchasing properties through their phones, through agents, without ever setting foot in the suburb. They didn't care about the community. They cared about the trajectory. And the money moved faster than any actual person trying to save a deposit ever could. So if your current plan is, I'll just find the affordable suburb nobody knows about yet, I'm sorry, but that plan is dead. The moment a suburb gets found, it's already gone. There is no hidden gem. They've all been found. Number 10, Woollahra. Woollahra doesn't make you feel poor loudly. It's not aggressive about it. It's just quietly, elegantly out of reach. And somehow that's so much worse than if it just came out and said it. So here's the setup. Woollahra sits between Paddington and Double Bay, and it has this incredibly well-preserved Victorian and Edwardian streetscape. Terrace houses, sandstone walls, heritage overlays basically everywhere you look. The median house price is sitting around $4 to $5 million. And it holds the highest concentration of heritage-listed properties of any suburb in New South Wales, which sounds impressive. And it is. But here's what nobody tells you about what that actually means for anyone trying to get in. Those heritage protections mean you cannot knock anything down. You cannot subdivide. You cannot build up. The suburb is legally frozen in time. Every single development idea hits a wall because the law says no. Which sounds lovely, right? Beautiful, preserved streets, sandstone walls, gorgeous old terraces. Sounds like a dream. But here's the catch. When you can't build anything new, the number of available homes is permanently fixed, and the number of people who want to live there keeps growing. So what you've got isn't really a housing market anymore. It's an auction with a fixed number of tickets, and the tickets only come up when someone who already owns decides to sell. And the people who own there? They vote for those heritage protections every single election, because their property value depends directly on nothing new ever being built. The locked supply is the whole game. Keep it scarce, watch the asset grow. So the same laws that make Woollahra genuinely beautiful to walk through are the exact laws that make it permanently inaccessible to anyone without serious generational wealth behind them. It's gorgeous, and it is absolutely designed to stay that way. For a very specific group of people who already got there. Number 11, Strathfield. Strathfield hits different, because this one was never supposed to happen. This wasn't Point Piper. This wasn't Vaucluse. This was the suburb you actually worked toward. The realistic one, the achievable one. The one where a dual-income household with real jobs could actually land if they were disciplined enough. That promise is completely dead. Strathfield sits about 12 kilometers from the CBD. No harbor views, no seaplane terminal, no celebrity residence. Just good schools, solid train links, and one of the most genuinely tight-knit communities in Sydney. Built largely by Korean-Australian families who moved in during the 80s and 90s, bought modest homes, and created something really special there over decades. The median house price is now between $3 and $3.5 million. Let that sink in. To buy at that median today, you need a deposit of around $600,000 to $700,000. Not the house, just the deposit. And here's the maths that'll break your brain. To save that while renting in Sydney, where rent alone is probably costing you $30,000 to $40,000 a year, you'd need to put away $50,000 on top of that every year for over a decade, without a single emergency, without anything going wrong, ever. Sydney's median house price to income ratio is sitting at 9 times or higher. 9 times your entire household income for the normal suburb, not the fancy one. But here's what really makes this feel like a gut punch. The families who built Strathfield, who scraped together deposits in the 80s and 90s and poured everything into modest homes on quiet streets. Their kids grew up there. They went to those schools. They know every corner of that suburb, and they cannot afford to buy a single thing in it. The parents built the community. The kids got priced out of it. That's the broken promise sitting right there in the middle of Sydney, 12 kilometers from the CBD, with good schools and solid train links and absolutely no way in. Number 12, Northbridge. Northbridge is the one that makes everything click. And I saved it for last on purpose, because Northbridge isn't famous. It's not flashy. It doesn't have celebrity residence or a seaplane terminal or a Reddit thread about its $20 million ghost houses. It's just a small, quiet suburb on the lower North Shore with harbor views and a village feel and streets so calm you could hear a leaf drop. The median house price is $4 to $5 million. For quiet, for normal, for unremarkable. Let that sink in. This is the final revelation of the whole tour. It was never just about the famous suburbs. It was never just about the iconic views or the old money postcodes or the harborside trophy homes. It's the quiet ones too, the normal ones. The suburbs that never asked to be unaffordable and never did anything to earn those price tags. They just got swept up in the same wave as everything else. There's a Reddit thread where someone wrote that there are no affordable houses anywhere in the country anymore. Not in the cities, not in the regions, not in the small towns. Houses that sold for $250,000 are now $500,000. And people are responding saying they're leaving Australia entirely, moving to Bali, Thailand, Dubai, because their money just goes further anywhere else on the planet. That's where we are. The Demographia report puts 5 Australian cities in the world's least affordable category. 5. And their argument is that this isn't just a demand problem. It's a policy problem. Land use rules, planning restrictions, tax settings, all of it has been quietly designed to make housing work as a wealth storage system rather than a place where people actually live. And there's no real political will to change any of it, because the people who benefit from the current system are the same people who vote in every election. So here's the thing. We've just gone through 12 suburbs and the answer is the same every single time. The system is working exactly as designed. It's just not designed for you. That's not vertigo you're feeling, that's clarity.